Mr. John Plecnik.
Chairman Young, Ranking Member Miller, distinguished House members, friends. My name is John Plecnik, and I'm here as a private citizen to testify against 151, who just so happens to be an associate professor of law at Cleveland State University. I might be better known as the most conservative professor in Ohio, a title for which there is far too little competition. Now, we all know the only way to deal with the very real problems of wokeism and liberal bias on campus, and they are real, is to hire more conservative faculty, because conservative students need mentors too. Conservative groups need faculty advisors, and faculty hiring committees need balance, so when we're bringing in new professors, we're bringing in a balance of new professors. But HB-151 and Senate Bill 83 admittedly do nothing to address that problem. Instead, 151 limits free speech. It promotes grade inflation. And frankly, it threatens to silence or even eliminate the endangered species known as the conservative professor. Now, in the first instance, I think the authors of HB-151 and Senate Bill 83 understand this because they've now limited, in the substitute version, the application of the bill to only public universities. Now, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If HB-151 is this beacon of free speech that will help engender new dialogue and bring in students and give freedom, wouldn't we want to extend its benefits as far as we can? The fact we're taking private colleges out as a silent admission, this is a bad bill as currently written. Imagine if the Ohio Senate proposed today that they were going to have a list of controversial beliefs and topics that the State House and the reps could no longer talk about. I think there'd be a mixture of outrage and laughter that a speech code would be imposed in a place where free speech is so necessary. But how much more absurd is it that we would apply a speech code to a campus where we need free speech even more than here? Second, HB 151 requires half, no less than half, of teaching evaluations to be based on student evaluations. Now that sounds good off the top. We want to be responsive to our students, but think about it. There will be immediate grade inflation in response. There will be immediate grade inflation in response. Why is that? Well, professors will start to cater to their students rather than educate them. You can't expect professors to be the gatekeeper when their jobs are dependent on keeping the snowflakes happy. With respect, if you look at student evaluations, and I'll say my students have been too kind. I've been voted Professor of the Year no less than twice, but even I have to admit that very seldom do student evals reflect the entire class. Very seldom do they reflect the big middle. Mostly students who are really happy with you and really angry with you bother to fill them out, and getting 5 responses out of 50 is very normal if you talk to any professor or teacher. So if you want a representative sample, student evaluations don't get you there. Instead, you're going to have professors who will grade liberally and tell the snowflakes whatever they want to hear in order to defend their jobs. And if that's what you want, if you want immediate grade inflation and the devaluation of Ohio degrees, where people say, oh, I know a 4.0 means nothing at Ohio State, vote for this unchanged. Third, the institutions of tenure, unions, collective bargaining, and fair evaluations protect minority viewpoints. And let me say, for the third time today, conservatives are in the tiniest minority on campus. We're the ones who need the most protection. Under the current draft of HB 151, a liberal dean or administrator can use a pretext of having below average reviews just 2 out of the last 3 years in any category on your evaluation. Not your whole evaluation. Below average reviews in any category to discipline or fire a conservative professor. And even worse, under the substitute version of HB 151, faculty are prohibited from even bargaining about the evaluation process, can't even have a seat at the table in deciding what's fair. Practically speaking, here's what that means. Your dean or supervisor, number 1, creates the review process. Number 2, reviews you under that process. And number 3, decides to fire you under that process. Let me tell you something. If you pass HB 151 unchanged, as it is currently written, no amendment, no fix, You're making the liberal deans and administrators and presidents, by the way, does anyone know of a single Republican university president or dean in Ohio at this point? Can you name one? You're giving them the power of judge, jury, and executioner over our conservative faculty with no due process to respond. Let me tell you something. When University President Joe Biden uses this new power, it won't be against Professor AOC and her squad of liberal faculty. It will be against Professor Trump, Professor DeSantis, and Professor Plecnik. And we need to bear that in mind. Now, I sincerely believe that the goals behind HB-151 are to have more intellectual diversity and to bring balance back to campus. As a conservative who's dedicated his life to higher education, I have fought for these goals since I was a college Republican. I encourage you to pursue these goals, to find ways to hire more conservative faculty and administrators so that we have true balance. But eliminating a diversity statement in a hiring ad is not going to change who we hire. No one reads the boilerplate, even lawyers don't, and I'm a law professor. The only way you're going to hire more conservative faculty and bring balance back to campus is if you pass a bill to hire more conservative faculty. You could make the SSI contingent on goals, but this bill doesn't get there. Please fix it.
Any questions? Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I love bipartisanship. Thank you for being here. Thank you for representing. Thank you for representing my alma mater, the Cleveland State University. You know, see what I did there? So I was a teacher for 30 years in the Brecksville Broadview Heights City Schools, which is a very conservative district southeast of Cleveland. And I served thousands and thousands of students over the years, many of whom come back to me, visit me at school and share their college experiences. I've never had one, and they have a lot of complaints, but never had one come back and say that their conservative viewpoint was silenced at their college or university. So my question to you is, are you aware of any research out there that supports or refutes the claim that this is going on in a widespread basis in our colleges and universities?
I can tell you that
Through the chair, please.
Through the
Thank you, Mr.
chair
Chairman.
to the representative. I can tell you in my personal experience as a professor, I've had universities tell me when I initially applied, you're Republican, you need not apply. I have experienced that bias as a student as well, but I'm not here to represent a national organization. Looking at Cleveland State in particular, I don't believe our students feel discriminated against because our faculty senate, working with administration, approved the Chicago Statement on Free Speech, which requires us to zealously allow free speech in every classroom and every corner of debate on campus. And I'm proud that Cleveland State University is FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education's highest order and award of the Green Light designation. So I can't speak to the wider world, but Cleveland State University is a haven of free speech.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the witness, thank you for being here. I concur. It's good to have that both sides of the argument. I think that's an intellectual piece that makes colleges, universities, and any educational institution key to growing our students into free thinkers. And I think that's what it's all about. Do you think that maybe it's the reason for pulling out the private schools and just making this the public schools, as that is where the woke professors are, where the most liberals are, and when you're here in this body, in this General Assembly, and over the last two General Assemblies that I've been in, I've seen just massive attacks on anything that doesn't align with the far-right viewpoint. Do you think the reason for that is it allows us to separate, divide, and conquer on this issue?
To the chair, through the chair to the representative, I think Oberlin College would debate the fact that they're conservative. I don't think it's about carving out the conservative private schools from the liberal public schools. I think that most universities and colleges, public or private, are very liberal. If you were to look at the affiliation of the professors, the faculty, the administration, what I do think it allows for is a recognition that this bill is not very well drafted, and you want to limit the damage. I think there's a desire on the part of the folks who introduced it to just pass it quickly, to get an accomplishment, to say, look at me, I'm like Governor Ron DeSantis, but no, you're not. No, you're not, because this bill is not conservative. It causes very real problems that you will end up having to revisit. And when you see dramatic grade inflation in Ohio, an inability to recruit the best professors unless you pay them many times more to make up for the fact that you've frankly diminished job security and tenure, people will look back 20 years ago and say, who passed this? Whose idea was it? And I would prefer we fix it now so that this can be a positive experience for Ohio and our universities than we pass a bill just to get a political accomplishment.
Thank you.
Representative Pavliga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Professor Plecnik, for being here and for your compelling testimony. You had presented, in my opinion, and I've asked this of other witnesses, a very valid concern about grade inflation that will result in weighting student evaluations. Can you, in a nutshell, in my mind, give us why you feel that would happen, and so we can continue to discuss that?
Once again, to the representative through the chair, once again, you're going to get what you reward. You're going to get what you pay for. And if you reward professors for having students have the subjective experience of just loving the heck out of them, professors will make students love them. And what students care about more than anything else are their grades, at least when they begin their academic journey. And so if professors are rewarded for having students say they're the greatest ever, even if that means giving them all A's, then that is what professors will do. Employees typically do what you reward them for. If you pay them more for giving higher grades, they will give higher grades. And if you tell them they'll be fired if they don't give high grades because their student evaluations will be lower, and we all know the tough professor typically does have a harder time getting good evaluations, every professor will want to be the favorite. Every professor will want to be the easy professor. And I don't think that's what Ohioans want. They want professors to be gatekeepers of higher education. They want grades to mean something. And when you get a degree from Cleveland State or Ohio State, we want that to stand up to any other college or university in the world. So I think there's a very real concern that if 50% of the teaching evaluation are student evals, where a professor can just campaign to be popular and, give away grades like a congressman gives away pork, I think you know how it's going to go.
Any other questions? I'd like to remind the committee we have a lot of people, so make your lead-ins a little bit shorter, please. Thank you.
You did recognize me.
Representative Lightbody.
Yeah, thank you very much. And through the chair to the professor, thank you for coming in. Earlier, Dr. Maccabee mentioned some research and some findings. He said only in 8 to 10 of the classes in the surveys that he had information about were anything political come up. I taught at OSU Newark for 17 years. I tell you what, I never knew what party anybody on campus was. Political conversations just never entered into any conversations. How frequently, you've identified yourself as being conservative, so your personal information may be skewed, but how frequently do you think on your campus controversial political issues come up and people even know what party anybody might be or not be?
Well, through the chair to the representative, I teach in law school. And almost every subject in law school intersects with politics and public policy. Even to teach estates and trusts, we have to talk about issues with the family, with marriage, with life and death, physician-assisted suicide. All these topics are relevant legal issues in estates and trusts. And we're not even getting into constitutional law. So I do think that it's possible for politics in appropriate ways to enter the classroom where you're giving students both perspectives. But to do that well, I think you have to have a mix of people. Just as we want to have a mix of men and women, a mix of religious and philosophical perspectives, I think you want to have a mix of political perspectives as well. And I will say students do come to me, particularly conservative students, for mentorship when they feel that they have been pushed too hard or they might have been treated unfairly. If I wasn't there, I don't know who they'd go to. There aren't a lot of me. And And I'm worried that this bill will mean there's a lot less of me. So I agree with you that 99% of the time politics should be out of the classroom, but there are times when it's appropriately in the realm of debate and discussion, and there should be some Republicans and some Democrats, some conservatives and some liberals in the faculty, so that students do hear from people who sincerely disagree and learn both sides.
Representative Gerald.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Plecnik, I just have one question. In your experience as a law professor, have you ever socially engineered or indoctrinated a student?
Through the chair to the representative, I'll quote or paraphrase Justice Sonia Sotomayor because she once cited me. We all have implicit bias. And I have no doubt that I am better at representing the conservative perspective than I am at the liberal. Now, I try when I have to teach an issue of law where there's still open debate, there's still cases undecided, to give both sides. But I have no doubt that I am somewhat more effective at teaching the perspective that I agree with, even if I'm not cognizant of that implicit bias, which is why you need to have both conservatives and liberals on the faculty. So intentionally, no, but I'm a little more excited about being conservative.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.